Chad Daybell's triple murder trial. Well, we're going to get you caught up on it, and we're also going to share some breaking news. Breaking news on another national case. The Menendez Brothers. Yep, they're back in the news. We'll tell you all about it. This and more on this episode of Charlie Crime Buster. Yep, it's what some people are calling, well, they're calling it the fastest minutes in podcasting.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the individuals interviewed and participating in this show, and do not represent those of Charlie Crime Buster nor Peacemaker Network. All individuals described or mentioned in the podcast should be considered innocent until found guilty in a court of law. This podcast contains subject matter such as violence and graphic descriptions which may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Well, hello and welcome to another Charlie Crime Buster episode. Glad to have you on the Charlie Crime Train today. As always, let us get some housekeeping out of the way. If you'd like to reach me, I want to invite you to reach out with a shout out. You can reach me, charliecrimebuster@gmail.com, charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Reach out with a shout out. Hey, you might have suggestions about other episodes. You may have questions about episodes we've already produced for you, or you just might want to disagree with something we say. It's always a safe space. Again, reach out with a shout out, charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. And if you'd like to support the program, we have a way for you to do that. You can go to peacemakernetwork.com, peacemakernetwork.com. You can become a badge, BADGE supporter for as little as $3 a month. There you not only help the podcasts, but boy, you help those great, brave men and women who run toward danger instead of away from danger. The law enforcement, first responders, and of course the brave men and women of military. That's peacemakernetwork.com. And if you'd like to get caught up on any of the episodes, well, go on over to charliecrimebuster.com. There's a whole bunch of them there. And we're going to be introducing to you this episode. We now are up on YouTube. That's right, YouTube. You can go to YouTube, just put in the search engine, Charlie Crime Buster, and there, my friend, you're going to find a whole group of episodes on YouTube. So go on over to our YouTube channel. I think you'll find it most interesting. Well, my friend, the trial this week, it was introduced by Larry Woodcock. You see, he is JJ's grandfather, one of the two children that were killed in this terrible, terrible tragedy. And Larry Woodcock, he actually referred to the trial as it was getting started, he said, as a boxing match. A match, of course, that is between the prosecutor and the defense attorney. So I kind of like that. Let's follow that a little bit today. In the prosecutor's corner, of course, we have the prosecutor, Rob Wood. He's the one who's given the opening, unlike the one in Vallow's trial where another of the prosecutors gave the opening. It is Rob Wood today who's telling us. And he actually chose to use the analogy of a book. Yep, a book to tell his statement. He, of course, said that Chad Daybell was an author. And so he said, here's what happened in Chapter 1, Chapter 2, etc. You know, it kind of reminded me of Casey Anthony's case where prosecutors there, in their statements, I don't remember which one, whether it was the opening or the closing, but they chose to introduce a presentation and to share it by days. And so they went day 1, this happened, day 2, this happened, and day 3, this happened. Now, I've always felt that that was a little bit of overkill on their part because of the fact that there were so many days where, well, Casey Anthony's daughter was missing, and so many days happened in between there that I believe he kind of lost the jury along the way. So here, the prosecutor, he's trying to do it by chapters. Not nearly as many chapters as there were days in that trial, thankfully. But that's the way he's going about it. But you know, I kind of like Larry Wilcox, JJ's grandfather's way of introducing what was happening on this trial this past week. He talked about it being a boxing match. So, in this first round, we're going to talk about things the prosecutor told the juries in his opening statement about Chad Daybell. Now, in the opening, he did manage to drop this in like a bombshell. Early on, he made mention that there were 2 dead children buried in the defendant Chad Daybell's backyard on September 2018. Hey, my friend, nothing gets your attention more than the murder of children, right? So he dropped that in right at the beginning. Now Wood, the prosecutor, he told the jury that the world was watching, and that Chad was a power-hungry and grandiose man who would, quote, stop at nothing. He also said that he was, quote, in pursuit of his rightful destiny. Now, he described Chad as a seemingly ordinary man who wrote books about the end of the world. He also said he was a person that craved significance, and he mentioned the fact that he worked as a sexton in a graveyard. Now, you will note that in many of our episodes about Chad Daybell and this trial, we mention this by using the term gravedigger in our titles in the episodes. One of my favorites, by the way, it was one entitled The Gravedigger Digs His Own Grave. So go back to charliecrimebuster.com. You can find all those episodes there. So now the prosecutor, he goes on to say that to the jury that Chad's wife was found dead in their marital bed, but that only 17 days after the death of his wife, Tammy Daybell, that was his wife, Chad's wife, he said 17 days, and he sure put the emphasis on this, just 17 days after his wife died, Chad is photographed laughing and dancing on a beach in Hawaii at his wedding to Lori Vallow, the same woman who was his mistress, the same woman who was the mother of the children that were buried in the graves on his property. And then again, he emphasized 3 dead bodies. So here we're seeing he's talking about the 2 dead children that were buried in his backyard. And then he goes on to say, well, that Daybell had a chance at what he considered was, quote unquote, his rightful destiny. And then Wood says, Chad made sure that no person and no law would stand in his way. And it's kind of a throwback to Lori's trial, because here comes those 3 big words that went over and over and over again in Lori's trial. Here is what he said. Wood says, Chad's desire for, wait for it, yep, here it is, sex, money, and power. Now, they emphasize that over and over again in Lori's trial, and so they're bringing that into this trial. He went on to say his desire for sex, money, and power led him to pursue such ambitions, and that this pursuit was what led to the deaths of Chad's wife and Lori's 2 innocent children. Well, then he goes and he describes these precious children. He talked about Tylee Ryan, described her as a normal, vibrant teenage girl who loved her friends and so much loved her little brother, JJ. JJ, who was on the autism spectrum and, of course, required special care. Wood brought that out. Then he took the time to go back and share how this couple, this doomsday couple, met at a religious conference in Utah. And that then Chad began to craft, and I kind of like the verbiage on this one. He said that Chad began to craft an alternate reality. An alternate reality. Now, I told you all about that reality. I described it as a way that they were justifying what they were doing. That they were saying that they were, God's chosen people to lead God's people, and that they were to get rid of anything that got in their way. He went ahead and described that justification that I told you about in past episodes, if you want to go back and listen to them. He went ahead and described that as an alternate reality. And he said that alternate reality was an obsession for glory. And it was rooted in Lori's adoration of him. That's what Wood told jurors. He said that they believed that they were religious figures. They called themselves James and Elena, and believed that they had a system of rating people as light and dark. Told you all about that in past episodes as well. Now, the state, of course, is accusing both of these as using their doomsday religious beliefs to justify their killings. Now, he also talked about Daybell, both Chad and Vallow, exchanging texts about Chad's former wife, Tammy Daybell, and that those texts described Tammy Daybell as being in limbo. In other words, that she too was possessed by an evil spirit. Even had a name for it, Viola. Now, Wood said that they viewed, here's where it gets down to the crunch, they viewed their spouses and even their children as obstacles that stood in their way. And anyone that opposed them, well, they were labeled as dark spirits, even zombies. And then he went on to say that this was a convenient narrative, that this narrative gave them the reasons that they could remove people from this world for their own good. So, not a lot is being said that I haven't already told you in episodes up to this point, but now here is the prosecutor driving this home to the jury. And this is what round one is all about. The opening statements telling what he is going to show that the evidence would tell them. Now, in a moment, I'm going to share with you about round two. This is the defense, the summary of the defense and their opening statements. And also, by the way, we do have breaking news about the Menendez Brothers. You remember those were the guys that were convicted of murdering or blowing away their parents with a shotgun. So we've got round two, what the defense is saying, and we've got breaking news about the Menendez Brothers. We're going to share all that with you. But right now, it is time for what we call Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Story of the Week. Now, our crazy story this week is about a South Carolina man who would not allow transportation issues to keep him from his own life of crime. Oh, he had big ideas. But those big ideas wasn't just to get a taxi to drop him off at a store because he had transportation issues. He didn't just get a taxi to drop him off at a store and ask the guy to wait while he went into the retail store to shoplift. No, sirree, not a mere shoplifting crime spree. So on February the 25th, a South Carolina man by the name of Angel Lewis Muzdu, he gets a taxi, tells the driver to drive to a Hartsville bank, tells the driver to go through the drive-through lane. Then he, our guy, Angel, he places an envelope containing a handwritten note. That handwritten note demanded money. He put that note into the tube. He stated on the note that he would kill people or blow up the bank if his demands were not met. Now, can you just see this in your mind? You're a teller at the bank. Cab comes up to the drive-through line. Now, maybe this is something that you don't see all the time, but maybe you do see it happen from time to time. People get around by Uber and taxis. But something you do not see and experience, I bet, as a teller, is a guy so stupid, so crazy to think that he can rob your bank from the back of a taxi in a drive-through line. Yep, you guessed it. Teller activated the alarm. And the police, well, they found the taxi and Mazdu. They found him and they arrested him. By the way, he was found guilty. And he was sentenced to 72 months in federal prison. And when he's released, he'll have 3 years of court-ordered supervision. So, my friend, this guy who's crazy enough to attempt to rob a bank in South Carolina from the back of a taxi, this guy is indeed Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook of the Week. Well, now back to our main focus. This is round two, and now it's time to see how the defense attorney will do. So in the defense corner is defense attorney John Pryor. By the way, I told you about him last week, that he had actually attempted not too long ago to resign as Chad's attorney. Only he was told no way by the judge. Now, remember in Lori Vallow's trial, Lori, who was the other part of this spiritual duo of death, the defense there really did not put on a defense after the prosecution rested the case. You see, they chose instead to attack the prosecution's case, to go for the fact that there was reasonable doubt. But in this trial, John Pryor, he said they are going to put on a defense. They will tell Chad's story. And by the way, keep in mind that both sides tell a story, and each side tries to get the jury to believe their story over the other. Well, let's see in round 2, what is Pryor telling the jury in his own opening statements this past week? Well, he begins, John Pryor describes his client as a religious man, a guy who wrote books about his faith, about premonitions, about good and evil, the coming to the end of things, when his Savior, in his mind, in Chad's mind, is going to come back. Then Pryor says, well, Daybell's life, it began to change after he met Vallow Daybell. Pryor described her as a beautifully stunning woman who starts to give him a whole lot of attention, and that this woman eventually lured him into an inappropriate and unfortunate extramarital relationship. Now, Pryor also told the jury about Vallow Daybell's brother. This is Alex Cox. Alex Cox, by the way, who died in 2019. I think that was back in December 2019. He also shared that Alex Cox had a whole history of violence, which included shooting and killing Vallow Daybell's former husband. That was Charles Vallow. He was shot on July the 11th, back in 2019. That, by the way, was claimed to be self-defense by Alex Cox. Later, it was ruled a homicide. Now, the medical examiner in Arizona talked about Alex Cox because, you see, Alex Cox died of natural causes. But Pryor said that Alex Cox was Lori's protector. He went on to say, quote, Alex Cox would do anything and everything to protect, aid, and assist Lori Vallow. Whenever there was a problem, or an issue, or a threat to Lori, well, he said you're going to hear testimony that Alex Cox came to the rescue. He even said that there would be a forensic digital data expert, that expert will testify that phone record shows Cox was present on Daybell's property a whole number of times. He went on to say that testimony from DNA and forensics experts, they'll even show Cox's fingerprint on the plastic wrapped around little JJ's body. He also mentioned that while that showed Cox's fingerprint, that absolutely none, of Chad Daybell's DNA or hair was found with the children's body. And he went on to say about his wife, Chad's wife's death, he went on to say that the cause could not be determined. And then he gives a warning to the jury. Don't be distracted by speculation. Don't be distracted by guesses, assumptions, hunches. And he basically tells the jury it all comes down to facts and evidence. So now, my friend, I think you and I, we really know where the defense is going to defend Chad. They're going to say, okay, he was a good man who was led astray by a beautiful woman who seduced him. Then they're going to say it was Alex Cox, the same guy I deemed as Lori's spiritual hitman, who came in behalf of his sister and went about eliminating those people that stood in the way of Lori's happiness. In other words, my friend, they're going to do the same old thing. It's called the sod defense. You know what the sod defense is, don't you? S-O-D, sod. Some other dude did it. Only in this case, it's a whole lot easier to claim that some other dude did it because that other dude is dead. Alex Cox, who died of natural causes before either Chad or Lori went to trial or convicted. And so now we know that this is really the crutch of what the defense is going to say. they're going to say that it was all on Alex Cox. Now, by the way, Lori's attorneys and her trial, they're going to appeal that trial. Did you know that? You see, after Daybell's indictment and not guilty plea in 2021 back then, well, a judge had ruled that she was incompetent to stand trial, that she was deemed not fit to proceed with a trial. But then they brought back, and she was tried and sentenced last year. But get this, she denied having killed her children. And she all cloaked it behind religious texts and beliefs. Lori had said that she had spoken to Jesus, that her children, her husband's wife, after their deaths, said that they are extremely busy and happy in heaven. And then Vallow went on to say Jesus Christ knows no one was murdered in this case. Went ahead to say accidental deaths happen, suicides happen, fatal side effects from medications happen. But the judge, he said we don't see it that way. He said at her sentence, I don't believe that any God in any religion would want to have this happen. The judge went on to say she just justified the killings by going down a bizarre religious rabbit hole. He said, and you're clearly, certainly still down there. But now Vallow, she's also appealed her convictions to the state Supreme Court. Her legal team is still raising the issue whether Vallow is mentally competent or was mentally competent to stand trial. So here we see what's taking place. And in just a moment, I want to tell you about something, now get this, something that literally caused Chad Daybell to shake in his, well, I started to say shake in his boots. I don't think he has boots on, but literally shake in his shoes. We're going to tell you about that in a moment, but right now it's time for us to share some breaking news. Stand by for breaking news. The attorneys for Eric and Lau Menendez, who were convicted of the 1989 murder of their parents, well, now they're saying there's new evidence. They're saying there's new evidence that shows the convictions and life sentences should be overturned. That was according to court documents filed Wednesday. You see, at their high-profile trials, and of course that's decades away now, the brothers did not deny killing their parents, Jose and Kitty, but they did argue that they should not be convicted of premeditated murder because they acted in self-defense, now get this, after enduring a lifetime of abuse by their father. Now, the brothers were actually retried, and they were found guilty in 1996. That's after a first trial ended with the jurors being deadlocked. Now, in a recent petition that was filed in Los Angeles Superior Court, well, the brothers now say that there is a letter. There's a letter that was sent by Eric to his cousin 8 months before the murders, and that letter detailed the father's abuse. Now, the petition also says there's another guy by the name of Roy, that Roy who was in the Latin Boy Band in 1980s. He, too, says that he was raped by the boy's father, Jose Menendez, who was an executive at the RCA Records. Now, the Los County District's attorney that prosecuted the trials back in 1990s, they told CNN in a statement, quote, "We have received the information and that it is in review." Now, that letter and a claim from another that the boy's father was sexually abusing him and that person, that is the grounds to attempt to vacate the sentence standing for the brothers. And at least maybe getting a new trial. So folks, this is breaking news. We could have a new trial, a brand new trial for these brothers who were found guilty of murdering their parents with a shotgun. So stand by. We're going to tell you all about that in the days ahead as this new news develops. But now, in a moment, I want to share with you something else that happened in the court that had Chad Daybell literally shaking in his shoes. But before we do that, our producer, James Buckland, has been very, very good about sharing with us news that we can use. So now it's time for our producer, James Buckland, and our scam alert of the week.
Thank you, Charlie Crimebuster. This week's scam report comes courtesy of the Federal Trade Commission. Have you ever had to deal with a tech support scam? You know, the one where the warning pops up on your computer and says that your computer has a virus and it gives you a number to call for help? Well, tech scammers are using these fake security pop-ups to get you to call that number. But instead of telling you that there's a virus, they now tell you that someone has hacked your bank account or your investment or your retirement account and is using it for fraud. To help, they say, they transfer you to another scammer who pretends to be a government agency, like the Federal Trade Commission or the FBI, or they even transfer you to someone that says that they're from the bank's fraud department. The scammer says the only way to protect your money is to transfer it to a new account. The problem is that the scammer now controls that new account and quickly cleans it out. So here's what you need to know. Number one, never call a number on a security pop-up warning. Pop-ups that tell you to call tech support are always scams. Number two, never move or transfer your money to protect it. Only a scammer will tell you to do that. Number three, never give someone a verification code to log into your account. Scammers want that information to get into your account. And number four, call your real bank or your broker or your investment advisor if you're really worried, and use a number that you know is real. You see, at Charlie Crime Buster, we strive to keep you safe.
Thank you, James, for that very timely and needed news. So here is what found our defendant literally shaking in his shoes. You see, we knew this was going to happen, and spectators said they saw Daybell literally shaking at the defense table when graphic photos of Lori Vallow's children's remains was shown at his death penalty trial. That's, of course, this past Thursday. They had a Rexburg police detective, Ray, who took the court through the horrific, terrible process of digging up the remains of these two precious children, Tylee, who was 16, about to turn 17, and little JJ, who was 7. Both were found buried on Daybell's property. Now, spectators at the courthouse there in Boise, Idaho, they noticed that this defendant, Chad, literally started to tremble as these gruesome pictures were shown to the jury. They talked about where the children were found. He told the jurors this difficult discovery. The burial site, of course, was near a pond and a tree, and there appeared to be a small body, he said, wrapped in dark plastic with duct tape around it. He even talked about how when they took little Joshua's body to the morgue, how, again, when he went back, he could smell the decomposing body of another one, that odor was strong. He even said we had to take turns digging because we were on our hands and our knees and the smell was so bad. He said he spent hours helping with a second burial site. They started to uncover burnt pieces of flesh, charred bone, fatty tissue. They found the shape of a green melted bucket with remains of little 16-year-old Tylee Ryan. Under that bucket, the detective investigators discovered a part of a human skull and some teeth. And then they showed these terrible, terrible photos. Now, the judge, he decided that it should not be shown on the public screen in the courtroom. Instead, it was shown only on the screens visible to juries and, of course, to the defendant, Chad. And there, they found him trembling. Well, he should be trembling. The question is, what was his part in all this? I think we're going to find that it is a whole lot more than the defense is trying to convince the jury during this trial. Well, there you have it, kind of an update of what's happened thus far in the trial. Next week, we're going to continue to tell you about this trial, and we're going to watch as this trial develops to see if Chad Daybell will actually get the death penalty. Now, in Lori's trial, the death penalty was taken off the table. Here, it's there, front and center. Let me ask you, do you think that he will get the death penalty? Do you think that he deserves the death penalty? What say ye? Reach out with a shout-out. You reach me, charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. So until this time next time, this is Charlie Crimebuster reminding you, yep, be safe, be alert, yep. For the life you save, it may be your very own.
You have been listening to Charlie Crime Buster. You can find additional podcasts at charliecrimebuster.com. You can also support our first responders, military, and law enforcement communities at peacemakernetwork.com. If you would like to make suggestions for future podcasts, please send your ideas to charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you will join us next week for another exciting crime story with Charlie Crimebuster.